Hey there, Emma here, and in 2023 I hosted a painting challenge called Dogtober where we painted a different dog breed every day of the month. You may have seen some of the clips that I posted on Shorts at the time, just showing like a few little clips from each painting, but I've decided to go and pull out the real-time footage and share them this year so you can follow along if you'd like to. A couple of disclaimers/explainers. The point of the challenge for me was that I wanted to try and loosen up. I'm a realistic portrait artist, and so I gave myself a smaller size to work with as well as a time frame. I'm painting on roughly about A6 size paper, which is pretty small. In terms of measurements, that's like roughly 10.5 centimeters by 14.8 centimeters or 4.1 by 5.8 inches. And I also tried to set myself a time limit of about 15 minutes. I really wanted to challenge myself to loosen up, but you can approach this any way you like. Maybe you'll do it in a different medium or a certain color palette. The options are endless, totally up to you, but you're more than welcome to follow along, and these are kind of like mini tutorials. I do want to point out though that as this was unusual for me and a challenge to me, not all of them are that good. I really struggled in the beginning to start loosening up, and particularly struggled with the long-haired dogs. But you know, it's an adventure and you'll see me progress through the month and learn a lot. If you want to grab the outline sketches, I have put all 31 sketches into a document, a PDF that you can download from my website. I will link that in the description. You'll just need to pop your email address in, which will sign you up to my mailing list, but then you'll get the document with all 31 outline sketches, roughly about the same size that I'm painting. You're more than welcome to print them, trace them, size them up or down if you need to. I'll be working with my usual set of supplies and mixing colors as well, but I will talk you through the process as we go. Let's jump in. Day 12 of Dogtober, and we are painting a chow chow. These are so cute. Let's get stuck into it. We need to mix up some colors. Again, not really straying from the color schemes we've used a lot in the past. I'm starting by mixing up an orangey brown, and we also want a bit of a black color as well. So we will do that mixing the three primary colors together. So with some yellow and red, I've mixed up an orange, and then I'm just putting a touch of blue in there, which has turned green. So now I'm going to bring that back with red until we get a nice orangey brown color that we're happy with. I've talked about so far in this challenge that I wanted to stray away from wet on wet. We do paint most of this wet on wet, but I think it works for this subject because they have so much fluffy fur. I feel like this is the best way to paint it in without having to be, you know, doing every stroke of fur. And I do a similar thing later in the month with the Samoyed as well. So I've got my nice orangey brown ready now, and so I'm mixing up my black color. So I've got blue, I'm adding red to make purple, and then we're going to add yellow to neutralize the purple and turn it into a bit of a black color. I never get it right the first time, so as you can see it looks really green. I've added red, gone too far, added a bit of blue, and now we're starting to look like the color that I need. We are going to get started on the fur now. So we are going to paint this whole furry little dog down in one layer. We are going to exclude the eyes, nose, and mouth. I'm getting started with the far ear, and I'm not doing like wet on wet in the sense of putting water down before I put any paint down. I'm going in directly with the paint at the top of the head, and then we will begin to fade that down. While I'm here, I'm flicking out a few little strokes of fur, and so this is the way that I came to enjoy painting the long-haired furry animals, is trying to do it in a big wet on wet layer and get them looking like a big fluffy cloud, but strategically pick a few spots to flick some furry strokes out to the side, just to emphasize that, hey, yes, they are furry. Now we have some very tiny eyes to work with here, so do your best to negatively paint around your sketch without, you know, completely making them disappear. At the end of the day, the eyes are darker than the fur anyway, so if you lose them, you can always paint them back on top and you will be able to cover up what you did on this layer. I'm not bothering to exclude the one on the left though, because really in the reference photo that I had, all I could really see were like its eyelashes on that side, so that's all good. But we will very carefully go around this tongue and mouth area. And yes, they do have blue-black tongues. That is not a wrong color placement by me, so we'll get to that later. Carefully tucking that under the mouth and taking that around the top now. You can also utilize something like blooms, which is where you intentionally try to create a textured area of a wet on wet part. So you'd go back and drop a tiny little blob of water in, and it would spread all the paint to the outside of that where you lift it off and create this cauliflower background looking thing. That is one way you can also make long fur look furry, is by intentionally doing those everywhere, but you don't have to. And I think sometimes they just happen magically anyway. I wouldn't get too upset if that did happen to you. But let's talk about shading on this wet on wet layer. So we've got a light wash over the belly, and I'm going around and fiddling with some shadows now to be on the right side. So I've added more paint to the tip of the ears. I've taken it down the back of the head on the right, a little bit where like the eyebrow would be, a little eye socket, and also just around the snoot. Taking a little bit ever so carefully over the top of the head on the left, but I'm just going to clean that up a little bit now with a damp brush. Spread it out. The difficult thing about working wet on wet is watercolor goes where water is, so it's naturally just going to start traveling everywhere, and you do have to manually go back and control that. Popping a shadow very gently under the chin, and also another one just under that as well, just to really give it big fluffy double chin looking kind of situation, and also just blobbing a few little spots into the chest fur just to make it look like there's just a lot of chunky fur in there. Gently popping some more around the nose, even adding a little bit of the black mixture in there to really deepen that part up, dabbing off the excess and just kind of inviting that over. Blending that out on the snout and dropping some more. A little bit on the inner corner of the eye, wrapping that around. If your painting is still too wet and this is exploding everywhere, you might want to you might want to wait a minute or so, but I'm just very gently putting some of that black color around the eye. You could even try using a smaller brush that just allows less liquid to live in the bristles. So something like the detailed 3/0 might be helpful for that. But once you've got the color placement where you need it, let's dry that off. Dipping into the black now, and we are just going to sketch the far eye in inverted commas, because don't really see anything over there, but I'm just popping it in anyway. I'm also going to start painting the mouth in now. So I'm going to start painting the cavity, like the open part of the mouth, not the tongue. So I actually really love this angle and the shape that we can get here. So we have this kind of really big curve happening at the top of the mouth. Just doing a very light line to connect that up to the nose. And then we're just going to pop this color in all on the other side of the opening as well. On the right, we're not worrying about, pink gums or teeth or anything like that. Just popping the shadow in. And so you can really go over any rough edges that you might have created here when you were doing your wet on wet layer. I've dabbed off the excess moisture and color from my brush, and I'm just very gently creating a little bit of an eyebrow eye crease situation on the inner corner of the right eye, and also just taking this color around the top and bottom of the eye as well. Just gentle strokes, pulling it out to the side, blurring out the little eye on the far side as well. And now I'm actually dipping into some straight black. Why I'm doing this with my big brush is a great question, but I'm just going to pop in the nostril details. So carry that line up the split from the mouth just very lightly, and then pop the two little nostrils in. They're not going to be perfectly central to that shape because this dog is looking off to the left. Back into our mixed black color, I should say, and just going back over the mouth details to make them really dark before we dry that off. Dabbing off that excess black I still had on my brush, and I'm just going to do a little bit more work around this eye. Getting a bit more on the brush, and now doing the nose. So I'm just going to pop this in, pretty light amount of color across the whole thing, like a watery mixture, and then I'll lift a little bit of it off before we dry it. So just gently filling in that shape, and I really basically covered up the nostrils, so I wanted to be sure we could still kind of see them. So rinsing off, dabbing off, and just sort of wiping off the top there. And just making that whole nose a little bit lighter in the center. Adding some brownie color into the black color. Just creating a whole different type of dark color there. I am going to paint the eyeball in. So just wanted a different brown here compared to what we'd painted on the dog. So we've got that now for the eye, and now we're going to paint the tongue in. So I've just added some primary blue into our mixture of the black color just to kind of have a black denim-y dark blue. And now we're going to go straight in and paint this tongue. It looks very strange, doesn't it? It looks like it's not right, but Google it if you don't believe me. I'm just going to pop a light wash of this color in. We'll do a couple little details and shadows and whatnot. But popping that in, we can grab a little of the black color just to try and shade a bit of the side of that and up the back. And I'm going to go over those open mouth details as well. Rinsing off, dabbing off into the orangey brown. And I'm just going to carefully add a little shadow to the tip of the jaw and bring that towards the right. You don't have to cover up exactly what you did in the first layer, but you just add to it. With some dark brown black color, just emphasizing the shape of the mouth and drying that all off. Into some dark brown color again, and I'm just going to go over that eye. I wanted it to be a little bit darker than it turned out after drying. Into the black color with a dry brush, I'm just going to paint the little split down the center of the tongue. Just remember to follow the shape of the tongue and the direction that the dog is looking. So it is curving down to the bottom left. I'm just popping a couple little shadows down the bottom of it as well, just sketching in some shadowy shapes down the bottom of this tongue, blending them out if they look too stark and intense, which is what I'm doing now. I just gave up basically, just blend it all in. We'll just pop it in again. Drying that off. Take two. Little shadow down the bottom and creating that split again down the tongue. Little shadow on the right side as well. I'm just going to blend that one out a bit. And a little one up the back as we bring that split down. Into some brownie blue, one more time over the eye. And I'm just going to do a few more brush strokes around this eye, fairy strokes. Give it a bit more of an expression, make it look a little bit older as well. I'm going to dot some little whisker dots on the side of the muzzle as well, and we'll paint just a couple in there. Now you're about to see an eye highlight appear, but don't worry about it because I'm very shortly going to rub it off and redo it properly. So I did just want to include this clip in because this is where I paint the whiskers. So I've got black on my brush, just from the pan, Mars black, not my mixed black. I'm just doing a few little curved whiskery strokes from the muzzle, from the dots that we just painted in. Keeping them nice and fine, curving them out, trying to vary the direction and the length of them so they look a bit more natural. And now I'm going to dip into some brown color and dab off the excess and just do a little bit more shading around this eye. I just really wanted to, I guess, make this eye look a bit more recessed into all the fluff. I didn't want it to look like it had just a very two-dimensional face. I wanted it to look like the fluff was kind of, you know, coming out all around this eye. So I really wanted to shade around there and using this color as a bit of a transition. I'm also just going to take a little bit of a split down the center of the head, just very, very lightly there, a curve that almost follows the direction of the tongue curve, deepening up the two ears just a little bit. I've got very little moisture on my brush, further outlining the very edge of the muzzle on the left. A little bit more blue-black color around the eye. And I have now removed the eye highlight for us to redo. So I just painted over it basically. You can gently scrub away at it. White gouache is usually forgiving. And now I'm going back in to just paint 2 tiny little dots and a very, very, very tiny crescent shape at the bottom of this eye. So we're working with super tiny shapes here. That big one just overtook the whole eye, so I wanted to remove it and do this again. Also blending out that bottom crescent a little bit as well. Getting rid of my detail brush now, dipping into our mixed black color, and again I'm just fiddling with the shadow around this eye, pushing it back into the head a little bit there, rinsing off, dabbing off, and just going to use a clean damp brush just to scrub away at some of what I've done, soften the edges. Every time you scrub something off, you want to dab your brush off, and sometimes you need to clean it off as well. Otherwise, you're just going to be introducing the same color back onto the page. Dipping into some brownie color now, and I'm just going to do a few little details in the fur. Now, I don't really know that this is necessary because I go back and just soften it all. So you can make a decision if you want to do this here, but I've just on a dry layer begun kind of rubbing my brush in a few spots to deepen up these little, tufts of fur and the shadows within them. I would say the one under the chin is probably more important than the rest, but you're about to see me just rub away at them because they just look too out of place. And I did prefer the softness that I had before. So rubbing those away until I feel a little bit better about them. But that is our chow chow. Really fun one. I love the fluffiness. I love experimenting with different but quick ways to create big fluffy fur. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will catch you in the next one.